Good morning. Good morning. How is everyone doing? Welcome back to Hypno's Lions Roar. I'm going to cover a subject this morning. It's early in the morning here. We're getting ready for a supposed hurricane to hit here. But anyway, wanted to cover a subject matter that I get a lot of questions about from clients as well as just people in general. And that's being being in hypnosis. Is what does it mean? How does it feel? How do you know you're in hypnosis? Uh, I want to cover those things to kind of educate people on what to expect and what not to expect. Uh, Hypnosis is one of those things where it's a very individualized experience. It's different from everyone, uh, from one person to the next. No one experiences it the same way, although there are some general ways that people do experience it. In short, like I say, there's no one specific way of feeling or sensations that you should expect during any sort of session. Uh, the overall aim is just to simply get into a state of calmness so that you can focus on your change and access your inner wisdom, so to speak. Now, once again, all hypnosis is self hypnosis. Hypnosis is not something that I do to anyone, it's something that I lay the foundation for and then allow that person to follow the road into hypnosis. Now, I want to give you an example. I don't I don't have a pre idea, I guess you could say if that's the word, of how a person is going to experience hypnosis. I don't create one path. What I do is I want you to picture yourself on uh, picture yourself on a treadmill. And that treadmill is that you're standing on that spot and the treadmill is going to start up very slowly. And as you walk on that treadmill, you're not actually going anywhere. You're just kind of being forced to take one step after the other. And that's kind of what I do when when I lead people into that state of hypnosis. And what this does is for me, it gives me the ability to guide the track based on the person's reactions because I watch the person very closely. I look for subtleties in a person's body, in the tension, sometimes in the words that they use, expressions. All these things are cues for me to allow them or creating that opportunity for them to follow that path. So during hypnosis, as you're going into that state, the the hope is that you'll become very relaxed, and as you become very relaxed, you become very uh, trusting, willing, and just allow things to happen. If a person says that that they're not going to go into hypnosis and it's not going to work on them, then chances are they're right. I say chances. Uh, because if a person doesn't want to experience hypnosis, there's nothing that I can do. Then why are we here? Okay. So I don't browbeat anyone into the state of hypnosis. Now, the difference is if a person feels they can't be hypnotized, but they're willing to allow me to assist them, then chances are we're going to be a success. Okay. Uh, so, what does hypnosis feel like? Well, that's a loaded question. Uh, Hypnosis feels like one, it feels very good. Uh, and there's many ways that people can feel in hypnosis. And I've got my list here. Okay. So, most people, 50%, 51%, 55%, will go into trance within minutes of sitting down in front of me. I get them in that position. Just like sitting down in front of the television. Some people can sit down in front of the television in a very short period of time. They're in trance. They're so locked in. Uh, People can enter trance when they enter elevators, right? Driving, at sports events, political rallies, church. Uh, all of these locations, classic hypnotic phenomenon, including time distortion, amnesia, unawareness of pain, etc., are all manifesting themselves at these locations. Because, take for example, if you go to a group setting, you're going someplace where there's a group and everything is focused on that speaker, and that speaker is using hypnotic language. Maybe they've got things on the stage that's causing them uh, as part of their program to get people locked into them. You can go into that trance state very, very easily and very quickly. But what does a hypnotic trance feel like? Well, a sense of comfort, pleasant relaxation, a feel of floating, a sense of disconnection from the physical body, the general lack of concern for anything because you're here in the moment. Uh, but there's no one way that a person is going to feel. Now, we've all seen the movies where a hypnotist will pull out a pocket watch and start swinging it back and forth, much like this right here. And some people may be asking, so, well, okay, that was convenient. You've got a pocket watch. Yeah, I've got a pocket watch. My son gave this to me a while back, and I use it for demonstration purposes. But this is not something that we use, although you can, because the reason the pocket watch way back in the day was so prevalent is because it was convenient for a person to have. I could use a pendulum, I could use a string or something, just something for a person to focus on, just as easily as focusing on a point on the wall, or that, to where, just like sitting down in front of the TV, that person is focusing on an item. Okay. Uh, Now, when a person is in hypnosis, they're not unconscious. They're not at the mercy of the hypnotist or myself. I can't get anybody to do anything that they don't want to. Now, but let me clarify that. A person will not do anything that is against their moral code, or that they don't have the propensity to do when they're out of hypnosis. Okay. So if I'm working with an individual and I ask them that when you come out of it, when you're awake back in the conscious world, you're going to give me your ATM card and your authorization code. Now, most people will pop out of hypnosis at that point and go, No, what? You're not, no, we're not doing that." Or they'll wait, and that's just not something that they're naturally going to do. However, out of 100 people, I could probably get about 5 of them to do that, because that would be their natural propensity to do something like that, as far as their comfort level, trusting level, whatever. Hey, if you need it, here it is. Very trusting. Because think about it, online scams or telephone scams, that people calling and getting account numbers and this, and they get them without verifying. So people do, for the most part, a lot of times, what they're told or asked to do. So the truth about hypnosis is, it's a lot less dramatic than one would think. It's a very pleasurable thing. But at the same time, hypnosis can yield remarkable benefits to a person. That's why I work with them. That's why people come and see me. Um, but you don't have to be under in order to experience hypnosis, because I'll explain that here in a moment. Hypnosis, as I said, is a deep state of relaxation. Um, and there are some similarities between hypnosis and sleep. And you'll hear a lot of times a hypnotist use the word sleep. And really, the reason for that is because sleep is a word that everyone understands. They know what it is to go to sleep. The subconscious mind has a connection to sleep and relaxation. Okay. But it's not sleep. So sleep is really used as more of a trigger word than anything to get the person comfortable. Now, there's there's parallels between hypnosis, meditation, and daydreaming and prayer. Okay. Achieve this state of hypnosis and you go into that state of hypnosis, that is a destination. Now, what differentiates between hypnosis, meditation, daydreaming, and going into prayer? It's intent. The word is intent. What is your intentions? You're going to the same place, but the intentions or what you're doing is different. Meditation, mind body connection, focusing on a particular thing to meditate on it, to question it, whatever the case may be, whatever meditation means to you, whether it's waking, eyes open meditation, closed, what I mean, it varies. Daydreaming is really you just kind of sitting, and everybody's daydreaming. They just kind of sit and zone out, get lost in thought about whatever, and somebody will snap you out of it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, what were you thinking about? I don't know. I just this, that, and the other, I guess. And you may or may not know her that it just one, it's nobody's business, but that's the process of daydreaming. And then you have prayer. Prayer is an interesting thing because you go into prayer like you go into hypnosis and like you go into meditation and you go into that daydreaming state. The destination of where you're going is the same place, into the subconscious mind, into that arena, if you will. And it comes down to intent of why you're there and what the purpose is. Uh, what does hypnosis feel like? And does it matter how hypnosis feels to you in order to be effective? And the answer to that is no, it doesn't matter how hypnosis feels for it to be effective. There are some people that will uh, have a preconceived idea of what hypnosis is. And if they don't achieve it, they don't feel that they were hypnotized. But as a hypnotist, they're in the state of hypnosis. They're in the state of trance at some level. Uh, but how is hypnosis different from sleep? Now, sleep is a natural state of reduced consciousness that your mind and body are able to rest on a routine basis, whereas hypnosis is often defined as the induced trance-like state in which a person is suggestible and capable of recovering suppressed memories and making lifelong changes and so on and so forth. Uh, Hypnosis is a natural, deep state of relaxation, and it's heightened by awareness. Uh, while hypnotic suggestions can be used to help sleep disorders fall asleep. So the state of hypnosis is an intense state of concentration, and it can open the mind, the subconscious mind, to new experiences, and it becomes very suggestible, and it has, as well as to positive transformation. During hypnosis, your attention is so focused that the rest of the world simply falls away, allowing you to concentrate on making these positive changes and progress. At no time are you not in control. You're always in control because you have to agree to the changes that are being suggested to you. You have to allow the subconscious mind to accept those things. You have that capability. The challenge is that most of the time when people go into that state of hypnosis, it's not being done under a controlled situation. It's being done as a result of trauma, high emotional states. Uh, I call it on accident hypnosis because you have no idea what's going on. You've entered that state of hypnosis or trance by accident, by peripheral things that are going on. And then once that's done, whatever information is being presented, one, you don't know that you can stop it. And two, it's being accepted into the subconscious mind. And once that veil of consciousness comes back down as the filter on your subconscious mind, those things become new imprints, new data points that you're going to use going forward. And usually for the rest of your life, unless those things are changed in some way or pulled out or modified. Okay. So to induce the state of hypnotic state, you're the hypnotist, i.e., me, uh, will ask you to imagine certain sensory experiences. Imagine this, picture this, pretend, imagine yourself in this environment. And a lot of people may think this, well, that's kind of goofy. But understand this: if you go on a vacation and you've gone to a vacation to a beach in Florida, and the beaches in Florida are gorgeous. The water's crystal clear. It's just amazing. Water's warm. Uh, so imagine you've gone on a vacation to Florida to these amazing beaches. You come home and you tell your best friend, you tell your mom, your dad, whoever it is, that you're about your experience. There are many times that as that person is explaining their experience, the person that they're explaining it to gets connected to that, and they start to experience much of the same things that the other person experienced that was actually there because of the emotional connection, because you're so detailed. Because now, if you're sitting there and say, "Yeah, we went to a beach in Florida, the sand was white, water was clear, it was nice, it blah," and you're done. It's not gonna be it's gonna be a non-experience for the person. They're gonna look at you like, "Well, it didn't seem like you really enjoyed it." However, if you're presenting it to them and say, "Man, you absolutely have to go to the beach in Florida at this one position, this beach." I mean, we got there, the sand was so white and it was fine, it was like baby powder, and the water was clear. You could walk out 3 or 4 feet, look down and count your toes. And you walk out further, you can see everything. You can see fish going through and darting through and this and the sun was amazing. The breeze was nice. That the seagulls were swooping in and catching fish and this, and you're tying them into that story, and the person gets drawn into that to where they are focusing on you singularly, and by the time you're done, it goes, "Oh my gosh, I have got to go to Florida to experience that." Well, in many times, that's you just place that person into hypnosis. You've led them into that experience, and it's as simple as that. So, as the hypnotist, we're doing the same exact thing when we're talking to you about being in the mountains or being on the beach or being this, and that we're inducing that relaxation, singularly focus to lead you into an experience that you've probably experienced before, or you've experienced, but you've not experienced in the way that's going to be explained to you or ask you to picture or feel, because we all have that capability. And that what that does is it leads you down the path into deeper relaxation. Now, once you reach that calm hypnotic state, at that time, once you get down to the level of depth or where the hypnotist wants you to be, or where they've got you to be, and where that you to that point where that's where you stopped or whatever the case may be, this is where the suggestions start coming in about whatever you're there to overcome. Because once the subconscious mind accepts those things, it becomes a natural part of you. Because hypnosis will always, always, always succeed so long as you accept it, you want it, and you allow the subconscious mind to do its job. Because there's many times that, well, most of the time when I meet with clients, the first 3 or 4 sessions when they're done, I tell them the best thing you can do is forget you were here, which means don't think about it, don't talk about it, don't enumerate about it, or don't do anything that's going to question the subconscious mind to drag it back into the area that you're trying to escape from. If you've got somebody at home, uh, wife, husband, whoever, and you go home and say, "Well, how was it? Tell me about it." I tell my clients, "Look, Mr. Wayne said for me not to talk about it right now. If you have any questions, call him." Because I don't want anybody monkeying around with the process that I'm taking through people through. Now, after about 3 or 4 sessions, after that, they can talk to people because those 3 or 4 sessions, the first 3 or 4 sessions, and again, this is the method in the my madness, is those first 3 or 4 sessions are going to set that person in a way. And then after that, they can talk about it because I've already preconditioned them for the next session and reinforcement, so on and so forth. Uh, and hypnosis is beneficial to, if you ask a question, can hypnosis help me with blah, blah, blah? The answer 99% of the time is going to be yes, it can. So, and everybody's got a different blah, blah. Okay. Uh, Now, how is hypnosis different from meditation? Well, again, intent. What's your intentions? Uh, Meditation can be thought of as like a means of habitually training your attention and present awareness to be in the moment, to be to have that mind body connection, to live in the moment, to be connected in in where you're at. Uh, but there's an overlap between hypnosis and meditation. Um, Both of them, you're relaxed, deep concentration, well-being. Um, Both can be, uh, you can feel detached from the immediate concerns of the world, if you will, that you don't care about anything that's going on around you. And both help you focus your attention and lead to a reduction in stress. I always like to say meditation is uh, hypnosis' little brother, if you will. Now, I've had people come to me and they have uh, meditated. They want and meditated for years, but a lot of them have said, I've never been able to achieve what I think is meditation. Is that something that you can help me with? My answer to that is absolutely. Because once you go into the state of hypnosis and experience hypnosis with a hypnotist, and you do that a couple of 3 or 4 times, you're going to understand what hypnosis is. You then have a yardstick in which to measure it by. And when you go into your meditative state, whatever it is, you're going to drop down into meditation very, very quickly because the track into that hypnotic state and into that meditative state many times are one and the same, although the intent is different. Why are you meditating? What's the purpose of your meditating? And it's different for everybody. So, but hypnosis and meditation, they both rely on the mind body connection and the deepening concentration, the feelings of relaxation and calm. Uh, Similar psychological changes take place. Specifically, both states can produce increased blood flow to interior uh, limbs and brain and controls and empathy, decision making, and so on. Both can do that. And again, it goes back to intent. Uh, Hypnosis can help specifically to set and pursue specific goals, while meditation promotes a general well-being of yourself, to de-stress, to recenter yourself. And that's where the differences can be. But sometimes they're the same. It depends. Uh, So what does it feel like to be in a hypnotic state? Um, and it may sound disappointing, but there's really nothing extraordinary about being in a hypnotic trance sometimes. The number one answer that I get from my clients when they come out of the state of hypnosis, or they're brought back to the conscious word, is once they're able to uh, take a breath and come all the way back, the number one word that I hear is wow. WOW, wow. And then followed up was, that was amazing, that was interesting, that was fantastic. I didn't expect that, whatever. But the number one word is wow. And I like hearing that because that gives me an idea of where that person was. Okay. Uh, if you're an athlete, a high level athlete, chances are you go into trance every time that you compete or every time that you get ready for competing, because you go into that zone, into that singularly focused uh, mentality, and everything else is cut out. If you ask an athlete after they're not in that competitive state, after they're not in that competition or that game, when they're done, says, "Hey, well, did you notice so and so over here?" And go, "I had no idea," because they don't, they block out of the peripheral. They have one area that they're focusing on. It's like the coach will say, "Hey, get your head out of your ass and get your head in the game." That's what he's talking about. Get in the zone. Um, you'll feel deeply relaxed during hypnosis, but you don't lose consciousness. In in the in a sense, you don't lose consciousness. If you go into deep hypnosis, you may not remember anything that comes out. Imagine it's a pendulum. On one side, you remember everything. You're hypersensitive. You could hear for the sometimes I'll tell my clients, you're going to be so hypersensitive, or could be, that you could hear a flea fart. You could hear everything. You're going to remember everything. Or on the other side of that pendulum, when that pendulum swings the other way, you're not going to remember anything. My voice is going to be present, and then it's just going to be gone. You're not going to remember it. Or that pendulum's going to swing back and forth between the two, where you come in and you're out and up and down and this and that. You're still in the state of hypnosis. You're still in the state of trance, but your awareness is different. It fluctuates. but you but you're very deeply relaxed. You may still be aware of what's going on around you, uh, but you're not asleep, in the sense of, if all of a sudden I said a fire broke out and says fire, well, your subconscious is going to wake you up. It's going to bring you back to the conscious world immediately. Let me give you an example. Imagine that you're at home at night. You've gone to bed, you've gotten in bed, you've fallen asleep, you're sleeping really good. And maybe you have a dog. Let's say you have a dog. And that dog barks at night. Majority of the time when the dog barks at night, you don't hear it. Or you may hear it and you know, okay, dog bark, and you're back to sleep. But when you own a dog, you know the dog's bark. There are certain barks that cause you to pay attention. And when that certain bark occurs in the middle of the night at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're deep asleep, and that bark occurs, you're awake immediately, because that bark tells you that it's something that you need to pay attention to. Just like new mothers, or children, when you have a baby in the house, there are certain sounds from that baby that will wake up the parents immediately. So, are you really asleep? Yeah. but the subconscious mind never sleeps. It's always there. It's always listening. It will wake you up. It is there to protect you. It is there to guide you. It will not fail. It will not stop. It keeps going and going and going. It's like the Terminator is what I tell my clients. Uh, but you'll have a feeling of comfortable detachment from your immediate surroundings. Your sense of time may become very distorted, almost like a dream. Okay. Um, Hypnosis allows your critical mind to take a break. The consciousness that we're at right now, where you're listening to me. That's the conscious. This is where it allows that conscious mind to kind of take a break and take a walk around the block, if you will. Uh, and then at this point, once you're in that state, we harness the power of your imagination, of your deeper mind through positive suggestions. Instead of commands, these suggestions are typically presented as in the form of an invitation, or uh, allow your subconscious mind to accept and make a part of your natural self going forward. Okay. But you cannot be coerced into thinking or doing something that you don't want to do. That's just simply a fallacy. Uh, so hypnosis doesn't have to feel like anything specific to be effective. You can hear every word that I say, you can hear every sound, and hypnosis will still be effective because the body will give off signs that a person is in that hypnotic state. I know when a person is in hypnosis and when they're not. And this is where I go back and may have to spend a little bit extra time in the thing called the induction to lead them into there, or maybe have to change my approach. But for the most part, I pretty much know a person what I'm going to have to do with before we get started because of the time that I've spent with them to understand them, kind of look at how they make decisions, what kind of personality that they are, what their rejections are, what their belief system or belief structure is, has a lot to do with it. Uh, and I know these things. I've made my notes, and I'm not a psychic or anything like that. I just understand the mind and how it works. Uh, so people have explained being in hypnosis as being in a trance-like state, uh, to where they're just in a trance, like a kid waking up or sleepwalking, something to that extent. Uh, Maybe an altered state of consciousness, where they have a increased uh, ability to concentrate. They're they're open suggestibility wise. Um, the zone, athlete being in the zone. Uh, Hyper awareness. This is what I was talking about earlier, where they just recognize everything, hear every sound that's going on. They hear sounds that they normally wouldn't pick up on because they become so acute in listening, that acuteness, if you will, uh, of their surroundings. Soldiers, when they go into battle zones, will become hyper aware. Soldiers drop into that state of hypnosis very easily. Uh, you can call that in the zone. They can treat it as if they're an athlete and they're in the zone and they have a function, they have a job to do, or it has that, or they're in that hyper awareness, uh, because their life is on the line. The life of the people around them are on the line, or it may be simply a state of fear. There's a thing called the primitive mind, which is where the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism kicks in. And you see this all the time on TV, with people that where the police are having a car chase and the car is zipping in and this. Well, they've activated that fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. Um, if you're in front of a dog that you don't know and it's growling at you in that low growl and the lips are raised showing its teeth, that will cause a person to go into fight, flight, or freeze real quick. And it's just a natural thing. Okay. The other way that people express being in hypnosis is deep relaxation, where they're just so relaxed, the body is so heavy that they're just calm and ease, and they could drift off very easily. Another one is non-judgmental, immersive experience. Some individuals describe hypnosis as a non-judgmental immersive experience where they feel more open to suggestions and less critical of their own thoughts and actions, which is a good thing. If you're overly analytical, this is where I try to get my client if they're extremely analytical, where they want to judge everything, analyze everything. Uh, Vivid sensory imagery, visualization, sounds, um, even physical sensations. If I get when a person goes into hypnosis, you could imagine them opening up their palm and let them know that you're going to put an ice cube in the middle of their palm and touch their palm, and they can start feeling the wetness of that ice cube starting to melt, and you feel the coldness in that spot, and you can intensify that feeling and that coldness and the wetting and so on and so forth, and even uh, telling them to raise their body temperature in the palm of their hand to make that ice melt even more quickly. That is a sensory imagery. Detachment or automatic actions uh, makes it seem as though your body is acting on its own, that you have no control over it, guided by the suggestions that I give. For example, if I have a person in hypnosis and I ask them, I've given them some suggestions, and I say, if you're going, I want you to allow your subconscious mind to accept this. Give your subconscious mind these suggestions or orders, or tell it what to do. And once you've done that, once you agree with it, just move a finger on your left hand, and their finger will automatically move as if it's on their own. Uh, then you've got the similar to sleep or meditation, uh, feel so deeply relaxed that their mind may wander around. It goes in and out, but they remain uh, aware of their surroundings and the sound of my voice sometimes. Uh, flow state. Flow state is they're so immersed in an activity of their own focus narrowly that it narrows and their sense of time shifts. Uh, this state can be often associated with high levels of creativity and productivity. And then accessing the REM state. Uh, this suggests that a person focuses, a person's attention can put them in a trance like state, same as a brain state where dreams occur, visions. And you can, in the state of hypnosis, you can have dreams. Those dreams can be elicited in this state. Some additional ways that you know that you're in trance or in that hypnotic uh, state is physical changes. You can feel the change in your body. Mental changes. You can feel the change in your mind. In between wake and asleep, you're not sure if you fell asleep or not. Uh, let me spend just a second on this. There are times that people will come out of hypnosis and they'll say, "I think I fell asleep," and I'll say, "Well, no, you didn't." Says, "Well, I didn't hear you. I did this, and I felt like I was asleep." No, you didn't. Well, how do you know? Well, when I have a person in that state of hypnosis, when I get to the point to where I need to bring them back, and I'm counting them up to bring them back to full awareness and back to the conscious world. I count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, eyes will open wide awake. Their eyes will pop open. And once it pops open, they're back in that they were in that state of hypnosis or in that trance state. Now, if they're full on snoring, which I've had people fall asleep that you have to bring them back up at the time that they make that transition into full asleep, uh, the body will let me know, but when their eyes pop open, they weren't asleep. So that's what I tell people how to tell that if you were in the state of hypnosis or not. Okay, analytical changes. Analytical changes meaning you can't do math. Um, you can't do anything analytical. You're just so out of it that you're that it's not gonna happen. Uh, Changes of awareness. You're more focused again in that zoned out state. Visual changes, seeing the vivid imagery. Uh, you're not unconscious. Enhanced intuition. You may be more perceptive. This is valuable when a person is in the state of hypnosis that becomes more perceptive to allow answers to come to them, decisions. And this is something that you can call on at any time if you once you learn how to get into that hypnotic state. Because again, all hypnosis is self hypnosis, and this is something hopefully that your hypnotist, the person that you're working with, is teaching you how to do to use this tool. Because it would be a crying shame if you walked out of their office and not know how to use that tool, that gift that you've been given from this day forward. Okay. Uh, Time distortion. Lose track of time. Some people come out of that state of hypnosis or out of that trance state, and wow, that went by fast, and it was 45 minutes. Or it could have been, man, that seemed like a long time. It's an hour and a half, and it's been 15 minutes. Time distortion. Uh, and then the rest and digest. You feel deeply relaxed. In this state, going into trance or in that state of hypnosis, it can be deeply restorative and a powerful reset to your mind and body to really center yourself, to become self centered, to bring things in. Because sometimes we all get out of sort at times. We're rattled with this. We've had such a weird day or this, and it's been all over the place. Stop for a couple of minutes, close your eyes, get back into that state, and get recentered, refocused to where you can get something done and you're not so fragmented. Okay. Uh, so those are the ways that you'll know that uh, you've been in a state of trance or in that hypnotic state. Now, how does the hypnotist know that you're in that trance state or in that hypnotic state? Well, they're going to look for clues. It's eye fixations, pupil dilation, uh, the change in your blink rate, eye flutter, rapid eye movement as your eyes are closed. These are things that a trained hypnotist will look for. The smoothing of your facial muscles, almost like you have the tension, and then all of a sudden it just smooths out, and it's just like peaceful. Okay, slowing of your respiration, of your heart rate. There may be times I put a one of those oximeters. It measures uh, oxygen levels, and but it also has the heart rate. And I may put that on a person and watch their heart rate drop. Um, Reduction in the swallow reflex. A lot of times when people get ready to go into hypnosis, they start swallowing. Uh, they may have increased volume of spit. if you will, and they have to swallow. Uh, and then that starts to reduce. Body immobility or stillness, they become very still, almost like they're locked into place. Uh, when I work with people, I always tell them, look, if you need to move at any time during this process, you need to cough, scratch, or anything, feel free to do so. I'm not going to lock you down. Well, a lot of times people go into that state and they feel that they've got to move. And if they've not been given permission to do so, then all of a sudden their subconscious mind, their conscious mind is going back and forth. And that can actually bring them up out of that state because they need to move or they want to move or whatever, or it may just dissipate. But what I do is I tell them that to give them that permission. Inner absorption and reduced external distraction. Uh, they're deeply absorbed in their inner thoughts and less responsive to the external stimuli. Uh, Meaning that I could ask them to move a finger on their left hand and they're so inner absorbed that they don't. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not listening. It's just that they're so focused on what is going on. And then I'll usually just go, okay, perfect, excellent, good job, and move on. Eye changes, increase moisture around the eyes, almost like you've eyes watering at certain times. You yawn or that, and your eyes start watering, or that. There could be times that where a person is dealing with some emotional things in their own mind in the past, the traumas or whatever, and there could be actually an emotional uh, release, which is good. Temperature changes, body warmth, uh, body feeling colder, warmer. The body will let us know that as well. Uh, Involuntary muscle movement or twitches or ab reactions. Those are important depending on what's being said or what the client is going through. That sudden release of energy. Now, there are times that you can get 5 different hypnotists, ask them questions, and you're going to come up with 5 different answers a lot of times. And it's interpretation, it's opinions, theory, all sorts of things. Now, in terms of the involuntary muscle movements and twitches, what I explain to people is this: it's like 2 tectonic plates that are butted up against each other. And there's pressure, 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 pressure. And at some point in time, that pressure needs to be released. And all of a sudden, boom, those tectonic plates snap apart, one on top of the other, creates that release of energy. Well, subconscious mind is the same thing. We have energy that needs to be released. If you've ever gone, laid down to go to sleep, or you've been watching TV, and as you're drifting off to sleep, all of a sudden you jerk and you jerk yourself awake just for a split moment, and then you just drop down deeper into that sleep. Well, same exact thing. That energy has to be released because if it doesn't, you're not going to accomplish much. You could toss and turn and this, and it's like being in bed and you can't get to sleep and you're moving and you just got too much energy. You need to release that energy. Same thing. It's all natural. It's the body does what it does. Uh, Catalepsy and arm levitation. Um, there are times where I'll have a person extend their arm, and a lot of hypnotists will use this as proof. Uh, Eyes closed down tighter and tighter. The more you try to open your eyes, the tighter they become, so on and so forth. And you're creating conflicts within the subconscious mind. Okay, and when you have conflicts within the subconscious mind, they'll typically result in not doing anything. Okay, uh, so the catalepsy and the arm levitation, the arm to becoming very stiff, like a rod, like steel, and you can't bend. And the more you try to bend it, the stiffer it becomes. The stiffer it becomes, the more you'll try to remember. So your battle, and then nothing. Okay. Uh, so those are the way that a hypnotist, some of the ways that a hypnotist will know that you're in trance. And there are others. There are others that we just instinctively know based on the whole of the client. When I do sessions online, like I'm talking to a client here and they're watching me, I'm watching them. And I tell people there's not a nickel's worth of difference between doing a session online and doing it in person. You have to set it up a little bit differently uh, in this environment. And I always send instructions out for that. Here's what I need you to do. And to create the best environment. When I first got hypnotized, I'm not going to say obviously, but we had no internet. There was none of this. And the person that I worked with when I was a young man, uh, kickboxing, and I had a friend of a friend who was a psycho or therapist, uh, psychologist, and he hypnotized people. Uh, and he hypnotized me. And there were times that he would hypnotize me on the phone. So it just it can be done. But in terms of the video and in person, not a nickel's worth of difference. So that's something that I always try to get across to my clients that it can be done very easily. It's whatever's comfortable for you. Obviously, I've got clients. Well, I say obviously, but I've got clients across the country in Canada, and this is how I work with them. So, and you may ask, well, why would they work with you if they're in another part? Just find a local hypnotist. Yeah, but a lot of people want to work with me, and I'm thankful for that. Uh, but there are a lot of great hypnotists out there. A lot of great hypnotists, and it's one of those things where, just like anything else, you just need to experience and try. And I've had clients come to me and they said, "Hey, I tried this other hypnotist, and I really didn't connect, or whatever," because I don't I approach things a little bit differently than 90% of the hypnotists out there. I have my own method of doing things. And, it's like my granddad used to say, that there's 100 ways to skin a cat, and they're all right because the cat gets skinned. But there are some ways that are better than others based on your skill set and how you skin that cat. So, and if that offends you, and if you've got a cat and the thought of skinning a cat offends you, I pretend I said deer. All right. Uh, that's pretty much it at this point. I wanted to share this with you because I thought it was important. It went a little bit longer than I anticipated. But anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My contact information will be in the show notes there, or you'll be able to find me on my website, which is uh, www. Here, I'll put it on the screen there. Uh, there's a website right there, and get in contact with me. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you have any questions, I do have a free consultation, 30-minute consultation, no obligation. Uh, the least that will happen is we meet new friends. You get your information, and I always have time to schedule those. But anyway, on my website is a button that you can click, schedule your free consultation, and just follow the instructions, and we go from there. All right. I'm out of here. Be good, be safe, and make good choices. Later.